One. Bingo. 12 o'clock rock on Monday, the first show, well, maybe the second show of our week here on ThinkTech. And every week or two or three, we like to connect with Gauri of the Global Relations Forum, which is her company, and it's located in Brussels. That's why we call this Midnight in Brussels, even if it's only 11 p.m. in Brussels. It depends on the difference in time. So she joins us again. Thank you so much, Gauri, for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Jay. It's a privilege.
Great to have you. So, we live in an interdependent world. Everything that happens seems to connect up with everything else everywhere that happens. We live in a global village for sure, and Europe, for that matter, Asia, they're part of our global village, and we need to know what's going on. We have to see world events not only through our eyes and the eyes of the people on the mainland, but through the eyes of the people who live in Europe. And you're the one, you help us out. Thank you, Gauri, for doing that.
Oh, my pleasure.
So we see it, perhaps imperfectly through the news here, and you help us, do a reality test and find out what is really going on. And, the agenda is pretty interesting. There are some things that keep on going, maybe getting worse, some of them, and there are new things that come up. So let me tell you what's on my mind that I would ask you about these days. The first thing is, no surprise, but you had perhaps a lack of full consensus by European people about whether the migrants should be permitted to come in such great numbers when there was really no infrastructure to accept them, deal with them, incorporate them, merge them into the Northern European society. Yes. And I guess it was not a surprise that some of the migrants, haven't done well. They haven't appreciated the benefits that are involved in being able to move to Europe. And some of the young people without jobs have too much time on their hands. And there was an incident in Cologne, Germany, that maybe crystallized some of the, what do you want to call it, polarization on this issue. Can you talk about it?
Of course. Actually, I just came back from Cologne. There's this carnival that takes place every year, and this time, given the incidents of the New Year's Eve celebrations in Cologne, where hundreds of women were assaulted, some were raped. So now this time there was really high security. But overall, you're right. The migrant crisis is kind of spelling a bit of a doom for Europe in small ways, immediate and long-term ways, as well as huge ways. Yeah. So I can get to them one by one if you permit me, because Europe is big.
Yes.
The first thing is that it's a large influx of Arabs, so Arab Muslims, whose culture traditionally is completely different from what the Christian kind of liberal culture here in Europe is. The way of life is completely different. And when you have this huge influx of migrants coming in all of a sudden, so there's no kind of step-by-step gradual integration or even letting the residents get to terms with it. So you have a bit of a clash, of course, a cultural clash. It's a shock. The second issue is that most of the European countries are welfare states. And if you have such a big burden of the migrants coming, basically these are asylum seekers who would not immediately get jobs, not get high-skilled jobs for sure, not the vast majority of them anyways. But this is going to put huge pressure on the social security systems that exist. And when you have that, without the good demographics that Europe needs at the moment, so you have a really big mushroom in terms of the large aging population, very comparatively lesser workforce, but also the economy is not that great at the moment. So the pressure which is going to build on these social welfare states is going to be huge, which could be quite a bit of a burden for European countries to handle for now. The third issue is that the way the EU is dealing with the migrant crisis. So there's not one unified response, right? Even though there's freedom of movement inside the European Union, because there is no unified response, and the EU itself, so the European Union's institutions are trying to push for a unified response, some of the member states are revolting against it. So you even have the UK threatening to pull out of the EU. And in the UK press, of course, which is more Eurosceptic, they're not very much pro Europe. There's been a lot of talk of how the jungle camp, the camp at Calais, basically, would come into the UK, and there'd be a whole large inflow of migrants, basically, if the UK stayed inside the EU. So this kind of news are making the rounds. But coming back to the cultural aspect, I think that is a bit of an important issue. If you look at the vast public, people who I talk to here on the streets are not very happy about it. They see it as an invasion of Islam in some ways. When I was at the carnival, I mean, this time people were literally, the migrants were given classes on what the carnival is, how to enjoy it, and, how to behave with women. And this is something that we take for given in the European society. But also in Sweden, recently there was an attack on a young lady who worked in an asylum center, Swedish, and she was attacked and killed by a 16-year-old Somali asylum seeker, basically, because she went to stop a fight between the asylum seekers. These have led to a lot of outcry from the public, but also extremist movements. You have the past week itself, you had a group of football hooligans in Sweden. So they belong to a political party which has more far right views, and they went on a rampage attacking basically people who looked like refugee children even. Then you have a lot of these movements taking place in Germany and also France. So I think the public backlash is beginning, basically.
Yeah, really, really too bad. You wonder if it couldn't have been avoided. I mean, for example, we had all those heart-rending pictures, I guess we still do, of migrants
Yes.
taking, life and death risks in small boats in the Mediterranean, of pathetic scenes in large, camps all along the route, of, remember that father holding his child in his arms and all that, and the world poured out sympathy for this. But what, I guess what we didn't figure is that they were coming from another culture. And you have to be integrated, especially if you're in a large group, because the cultures are very different. And what has happened here is they haven't been integrated, and it was like a bath of cold water for a lot of Europeans. So where at one time people were very sympathetic, very liberal, humanitarian about it, now it seems to me that because of these incidents, which are very scary, I think, to a European, who worries that in the crowd of migrants there are terrorists, and now you see violence coming out of the crowd of migrants, you begin to profile the whole crowd at every single migrant. And as you say, you worry about the effect on your social safety net, social security system. This is very threatening, and it sounds to me, see if you agree, that we have passed a tipping point here. That at one time it was, in favor politically and in the street, it was in favor of being humanitarian. Now the backlash has taken over, and now the political winds have changed, and now people in general, and that means big influence on the political structure there. They don't want this. They are demanding control. They are demanding steps to be taken to protect them from the migrants, and I suppose to send the migrants back or somewhere else. Is that the sense on the street? Is that what people are talking about now?
Yes, of course, and some countries are doing it as well, Finland, of the 30,000 cases that it received, so it had 30,000 asylum seekers, is sending back already 20,000 of them, um, approximately. So countries have already started doing this. And Angela Merkel as well, who's really come under fire. She had a very much open door policy to the migrants. She said all migrants are welcome, to Germany. But now she said that after the war gets over, they will have to go back. And one of the issues that most of the people here have been raising is that why are the young men coming here? They should be fighting in their country for the country's sake, They said if we had done that during the World War, then there would be nothing left, And in a way, it's right, Of course, it depends on person to person, but if the youth of the country are not going to defend their country, then it's questionable. Then you have the other aspect of freedoms, yes. To give a very personal touch as well, as a woman, I was also a bit quite afraid going to Cologne during this carnival time, um, because I mean things are taking it's all in the news. I've heard of these. It's a rape game basically, which took place in Cologne as well, but also at Tahrir Square in Egypt, where an American journalist was the subject of this game. So basically, it's a group of men who surround this girl and they rape her. There's a game between the men they play. They try to save her or rape her, and whoever wins. But I mean, the girl ends up getting assaulted anyways, and it's taking place in Europe. So it's shocking,
It is.
And
It's. I mean, it's shocking, and we don't even know the implications because it doesn't sound like the backlash is going to stop anytime soon. Because what caused the backlash isn't going to stop anytime soon, and then what you realize is that not only are the migrants who are present in these European countries going to have a harder time of it, but it's going to be hard to open the door in the United States or in other countries. It's going to be hard to open the door to additional migrants. So these few people, have actually screwed it up for thousands, if not millions, of people who might have had comfort here. This changes everything, and my thought is that it changes everything forever. It's a historical shift. And what is also interesting is that Europe and the EU is seriously threatened by it. This could have a profound effect on the solidarity of the EU and the future of the EU, financially, socially, politically, don't you think?
Of course, I completely agree with you. And when we're seeing it here every day, EU politics, there's so many meetings that happen here, all the heads of state come, and, I mean, the main problem now is that it's raising existential questions for the EU. I mean, not do we exist, do we not exist in a way, but, profound impact that it would have, as you mentioned, politically, socially, but also psychologically. When you think of the couple of terrorists in the Paris attacks, they did have these Iraqi passports. If they were correct or not, I mean, but you do get thinking, right? I mean, and the common man in the street is going to put two and two together. Even today, when I was in the train today, or in the metro even, I was afraid, I mean, the thought this go through your head that what if it gets blown up? What if it, and you look at somebody who looks a bit shifty.
Yeah.
But I took a train now this morning, so I came back via train from Cologne. And it's a train which stops in Liège, it goes to Paris. But because it was going to Paris, they literally barricaded the entire platform and they had security checks there, and armed guards with police dogs, and this was never the case before. So it is changing, I think, the fabric of Europe in a way, how the freedoms are being curbed, and I can only imagine would impact on chances of going to countries like the US or Canada, or that's for certain.
I mean, what that says, it's not only changing Europe, it's changing the world. It's changing the notion of boundaries and migrations. It's changing the notion of dealing with, unknown groups of unknown people in your community. It's changing how you walk down the street. It reminds me of the whole affair in Israel with the stabbings. They haven't stopped, Maybe the press doesn't cover them, but they haven't stopped. And when you walk down the street in Israel, you can't help but thinking, just as you were thinking today, that somebody might attack you randomly and for no reason. This changes the way our society works. Let's take a moment for a break. Gauri Kandekar of Global Relations Forum, talking about Europe and how Europe sees all these things. We'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week, we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to ThinkTech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
Through one. Okay, we're back. We're live here at 12 o'clock Rock. Midnight from Brussels. It's actually 11 p.m. from Brussels. With Gauri Kandekar of Global Relations Forum, who joins us every few weeks to talk about how things look from Europe at night. At night. Always at night. So, Gauri, this is by no means settling down. We have a problem in Syria now. Whatever motivates the Russians, they're siding with Bashar, and as a result, more people are being forced out of their city, their homes. Aleppo is people are leaving Aleppo by tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, and going west to the Turkish border. And Turkey is talking about clamping down on that border, and there's nowhere for them to go. This is tragedy on a huge level. So not only do you have problems, in Europe because of what has happened up till now, but the originating cause of all this is getting worse in Syria. How does the Syria thing play out in the mind of, the European opinion?
Well, I think Turkey is the more pivotal actor in that way, in that sense, because Europe already has this deal with Turkey where it gave 3 billion euros to Turkey to accept the migrants instead of them coming to Europe, and they stabilized them in Turkey instead. But it's not really working that well, I must say, because the migrants are still coming to us. There's a whole smuggling industry set up in Turkey to get the migrants to Europe, and on paper, the deal might be done, but in practice, it's a whole different story. It's a whole different ballgame. So how that pans out is what is going to really depend on how Turkey looks at things and how involved Turkey is and how genuine Turkey behaves towards Europe. So you just had Erdogan who was threatening to flood Europe with migrants, and then Angela Merkel is pleading with Turkey, to really tackle the crisis and limit basically the number of migrants coming to the EU. In terms of Syria, I honestly don't think I have a clear idea of who the immediate enemy is. So is it Assad or is it ISIS or who is it, Then you have Russia, Turkey crisis, and then how are things going to kind of take shape if you have so many divided actors, divided targets, so what is happening is a huge conundrum, and that's the same for Europe. On the one hand, uh, Europeans are bombing ISIS sites. Then there's the Turkey issue with the migrants, and then the Turkey Russia crisis, because Turkey is also a member of NATO, and now things are drumming up against Russia here. On the Eastern European border. So the Eastern European member states, which include Poland, Lithuania, Sweden, Estonia, all of these countries are still quite afraid of Russia. Uh, and if you notice, the top 5 NATO weapons are all stationed in Eastern Europe, pointing towards Russia. So this whole kind of bigger picture makes it so much more complex, and it's too much for, I think, an EU to handle. It's not united anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, and something you said a little while ago, that when the war in Syria is over, arguably there's not as much reason to welcome migrants. The migrants can go back to their home country, Syria. But it may not be as simple as that, in the sense that one, when they go back, they're not necessarily going to find a friendly welcome. Number two is there's going to be no economy to speak of when they go back. I mean, the place is being bombed and destroyed. All those photos and movie clips we see, show a Syria in rubble. And what will await them there? It won't be friendly, and it won't have an economy. It won't have homes. It'll be going back to Mad Max at Thunderdome. Some kind of wrecked society.
Right.
And we're going to find out. We never found out before exactly, at least not in this generation. We've not found out what it's like to have hundreds of thousands or millions of people return to a place that is essentially gone, with nothing to support them. I suggest that they will not be sustainable. They will not be able to live there. And for the lack of options, many of them will die. And Syria will be a fragment of its former self. Syria will be a failed state, no matter what happens.
Right. But this is what happened also in Europe, right? I mean, the entire of Europe was destroyed after the Second World War. And then you had the Marshall Plan, thanks to the US. So unless the whole global economy steps in to help Syria reconstruct, I mean, Syria is a really small country if you go to see.
Mm-hmm.
So getting Syria to stabilize might not be such a huge task as getting a whole Europe to stabilize,
Yeah.
So that, in my opinion, could be doable. But the most important and urgent issue is what happens now. And I honestly think that, it's my opinion, yes, that Assad could provide a little bit of stability for the moment, however bad he is. I completely know that he's the devil impersonated, but I mean, my fear is that, look what happened to Libya. Fine, Gaddafi was bad, but look what happened now. It's become an ISIS arena, basically, on Europe's borders.
Yeah.
Even though he was terrible, but he kept Libya united, he kept it under control. Assad is clearly against ISIS, and ISIS is not in Europeans or American interests, in nobody's interest. So he still might provide a bit of stability. I think he's the last kind of element that has this idea of Syria in a way. Otherwise, it just might become territory between Syria and Iraq. And same thing what happened in Iraq. I mean, you had Saddam Hussein. Everybody might not have been peachy happy under him, but after him, it's a failed state now. And you cannot have area of lawlessness, especially in an area as strategic as the Middle East. When these migrants do go back, of course, they would need international support for sure. But the question also is, what happens to Turkey, and what happens to those Yazidis and the other fighters that have been fighting ISIS that the Western countries have been supporting them because they do have their conflicts with Turkey. So how are you going to pay them back? Because after this is over, they will ask for retribution. Basically, they will ask for their own rewards. And that's a set up another crisis. And people don't think that far ahead, which is a big mistake, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Well, I think the map is being redrawn, At the end of this, Russia is going to be much more influential in the area. I think we're going to be less influential. I think Europe will be changed. Certainly Turkey will be changed. This is a moving target. That's why anybody who is working in the global relations forum area is guaranteed of lots of work going forward. You must be happy, to have all these issues that you can write. What have you been writing about lately, Gauri?
Oh my God, yes, I've been doing quite a bit of work, a paper on the migrant crisis as well. But I'm editing that for one of my junior researchers. And then I'm in the middle of writing two books, but on East Asia and Europe-Asia relations, energy issues. So a lot of things really. I've just back from India last week. We did a whole event on energy security. But yeah, all of these issues, you mentioned, and I have to keep on reading. I have a lot of information, but it also makes you that it has an impact on you, because you're so involved in these issues. So your day-to-day work, and you're all that. That's all what you're thinking. So I would love to be a farmer at the moment.
Okay, we're going to take one more break, Gauri. When we come back, I'd like to talk about, what Europeans and you think about the big game in the U.S. That is not the football game, but the election. We'll be right back with Gauri Kandakar, Global Relations Forum.
Aloha! Hello, my name is Patrick Bratton. I'm host of Global Connections here at ThinkTech Hawaii. We broadcast live every Thursday at 1 p.m. We bring Hawaii to the world and the world to Hawaii, talking about international events and various things of interest to the audience. Please join me. I look forward to talking with you and having you get to meet some of my guests. Aloha.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hittel, and I host the show called Climate Change Beyond Outrage. We go beyond outrage to find solutions to climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. I hope you will join me here every Tuesday at 1 o'clock. We broadcast live from thinktechhawaii.com. Aloha and bye-bye.
Back with Gauri Kandakar, Global Relations Forum. That's gr-forum.org. Did I get that right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So, again, we're in a global village. And again, nothing happens in one place without having a reaction, maybe an effect in the other, an impact even in the other place. And the biggest thing that's happening in this country, for months, for years already, is this election that's coming up this November. And it occupies, the magazines and the books and the TV every day, all day. It's more important than any football game, honestly. And football games are very important. So, we have, I can't imagine what the average European must think of this election, because you guys probably get the feed from the debates, and you get to see some of the statements that the candidates make, and some of what the press thinks about them here. And you must be developing a real sense of humor about it. I must think.
Yes, no, it's been so entertaining actually. The U.S. Presidential race, is, and in particular after the entry of Donald Trump. I mean, of course he was ridiculed here, but he's also seen as a bit of a threat. The UK Parliament is literally thinking of banning him, banning entry of Trump into the UK.
That would be unprecedented, wouldn't it?
Yes, they did ban the Indian Prime Minister before he became Prime Minister.
Oh, Modi, really? Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. So, they do have a history, but you never know. It's still, at least on paper, it's good, But most members of the UK Parliament would reject it, probably, I think. and probably Trump would be able to buy his way in. Um, but that's been the most interesting part of U.S. politics at the moment. You know, you have Trump, then you have, of course, Hillary Clinton. The other Republican candidates are not that well known in a way here. You know, we don't follow everything. Ted Cruz, of course, Jeb Bush, but Bernie Sanders, he's someone quite impressive, you know. If I was American, I would vote for him. But he really would. He's a European politician, basically. A perfect European
Why do you
politician.
say that? That's so
Yeah.
interesting. Because, you know, we are finding something about Bernie Sanders that makes him, you know, affectionate and lovable. And, you know, it makes us want to be with him. There was some very interesting footage of a speech by Hillary Clinton where she was surrounded by her team, her crowd of supporters, and she was, you know, shouting and castigating and demanding and protesting about things. And what one reporter said was, it was joyless. Whatever it was joyless. And then the camera, this is Charlie Rose, one of our, you know, midnight commentators on PBS. And then the camera turns to a clip of Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders, you know, looks like your uncle or maybe your grandfather. And he's so benign and sweet and friendly and clear and clean, you know, and just a good person. And the crowd around him were all young and they loved him. They loved him and he loved them. And they were together, they're completely in harmony. And you say, gee, that's the kind of guy I really like. That's what it is about Sanders.
You know what? I think the most endearing quality about him is his honesty.
Yeah.
And he talks so much sense, and he really talks to the future, you know.
Yeah.
Like we don't have, every politician has been saying, oh, we need change. No, he's like, the system needs to change, you know. The way we are doing things is not right. Like, US is a superpower. It's still the world's superpower. And so many people live in absolute poverty. It's shocking, you know. So he wants to change that. And it's so good to have a leader who's willing to lead that change. Nobody wants another leader who's going to kind of, okay, modify a little bit of bring a little bit of change. But no, he really wants to big change, you know. And that's the best part about him. The Hillary Clinton Trump card, sorry for the pun, but her Trump card is that she's a woman, you know. She brings up the woman card many times. And the mistake, I think, in female leaders nowadays is that they make themselves into men in a way. You know, so you have Angela Merkel, you have her, you have other female leaders, all wear pantsuits with short hair, and they make themselves really masculine. No, because, you know, I'm leading with a couple of other think tanks here. We're kind of making a platform for women in think tanks, and really pushing forward the women ahead, you know. And one of the issues we discuss is you don't have to be masculine in order to go anywhere. You know, why can't you embrace your femininity and go ahead? But Angela Merkel has done the same thing, you know, and her as well. So you really kind of think, do you really need to be a manly woman in a man's world? Go ahead.
Well, you said something interesting a minute ago that he was, Bernie Sanders was like a European or a European candidate or politician. Why do you say that? I mean, what is the common denominator that makes people think that he's like European?
Well, just, I wouldn't call him a socialist, of course, you know, I mean.
He calls
I don't
himself a
want to hurt
democratic
his,
socialist.
I don't want to hurt his chances of winning because that's a bad word in the US. But the thing is that the way he talks about distribution of public goods, that is what kind of harks to what European politicians really say. And what Europe is about, you know, is building a sustainable, equitable society. In the US, you see a lot, even with Hillary Clinton, she's been receiving money from Wall Street, and that's become an issue. And he's been so honest in saying that he's not received that. And he's like, that is bad for the system, you know. and that 1% should not be there. You know, everybody should have more unequitable distribution. You need more healthcare, and that makes sense. And no wonder all the young people like him.
Yeah.
I think the only people that don't like him are the ones with the most cash, I guess, you know, because directly gonna harm the way.
Yeah. And
He
so
would
much of
make
the
a perfect-
polarity in this country is really a function of that, the
Yeah.
privileged and the unprivileged. Well, that's it.
And
You know,
it's
Europe,
just-
Europe really has the right idea about that. We should learn from Europe on this.
Well, yes and no, you know, I mean, if you see what's going on now. But Europe has a way of dealing with things in a more sustained fashion. So in
Yeah.
the short term, it might be chaos. In the long term, it does, they do find a sustainable solution. I have to say that, you know.
So what about others? I mean, you speak of Bernie Sanders maybe the way I do, as the front runner as far as I'm concerned, you're
Yes.
concerned. But what about the people on the street, the people that you know, the people that you deal with? Do they feel the same way, or are they like Hillary Clinton better?
No, I think the vast majority of the people like Bernie Sanders. It makes a lot of sense here, you know, unless I don't think I've not met any of the uh, analysts or, you know, officials here who would like the Republican side. Or the Republican candidates. I mean, of course, there have been good Republican candidates, but you know, that doesn't kind of hit back to Europe in a way. You know,
Yeah.
the Democrats have been quite popular here, but when you compare Hillary to Bernie Sanders, I mean, they're the two leading candidates. No, it's Bernie Sanders all the way. And I mean, if he was not there, it would have been Hillary. Because of course she's a Democrat, she's worked with Barack Obama.
Yeah.
But Bernie Sanders' views on foreign policy, especially as well, they translate quite well into more pragmatic external engagement.
Yeah.
So I think Bernie Sanders for sure. But the funny part was, I must say, what got everybody shocked was, you know, what is the caucus, the Iowa caucus?
Yeah.
What is it?
What
They
is it?
literally had an article called Caucus for European Dummies, basically. What does it mean? And how can a coin toss decide politics? You know, it's really funny.
It's a strange system, and it's
Yes.
built so much around the media. It's kind of a feedback with the media. You know, you say something, the media comments. Now you have to deal with what
Yes.
the media said. I mean, the whole thing is driven by the media, and it's big business. You know, people are sitting by their televisions watching this as the ball game for day after day and month after month. It's the biggest thing, to the exclusion of all of the things. You know, in Europe, as I recall, they have an election, and it's short term. It's 2 or 3 months maybe or less, and
Yeah.
bingo, you vote. That's it. Isn't that right?
It's true, extremely true. I mean, people know who the candidates are. They don't I mean, election is business in a way, you know, in the US and in India. It's a huge kind of long drawn process, and, you know, candidates start kind of preparing for war, you know, long time in advance. Here, it's done very quickly. They're already, the candidates, the main candidates, already leaders of the opposing parties. So you know who's going to, you know, who you have to vote for in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's more entertaining in the US for sure.
Well, if you like that kind of entertainment, it's a little
Well, I
scary.
have to say something. It's if you see most of the people around here in the think tank communities, the views we get on the US elections are not from like Fox Channel or, you know, the others, big CNN, IBN. It's a large part the comedians. They've been playing such an important role of late. So people are really listening to the big comedians in the US, like, of course, sadly, Jon Stewart is not there, but Trevor, I think he's coming up. And the other ones, I forget his name, John Oliver, and the other one, Stephen, yeah, Colbert.
Comedy Central, eh? You get Comedy
Yeah.
Central and you're...
It's very popular. They're very popular here.
Yeah, over the weekend, Larry David, who looks just like Sanders, was a couple of skits with him and it was really funny. And it was iconoclastic completely. There was nothing holy about it, but it was very funny. And truth is that Bernie was funny. He was just as funny as Larry David was funny. So
Yeah.
you got to give him credit for that. But here's the the bottom line. Going back to the way we began our discussion today, Gauri. It's a global village, and you can't have. I mean, if America is to be sustainable as a world power, or even as a semi-world power, it's got to deal with the world. It's got to have relations. It's got to have smart diplomacy. It's got to be, it's got to be in touch with everywhere, and that means a president who thinks about diplomatic relations, a president who knows how to handle other governments and other countries, who knows how to make statements not only to political constituents rather in this country, but everywhere. And the question is, how do these guys present to the European as somebody that they will be able to make deals with, somebody who will help the world, help Europe going forward? Who do you like on that level? Who is there a diplomat in the house?
Bernie Sanders. I think,
Okay.
no, I'm not. To be very honest, okay, Europeans have already worked with Hillary Clinton. She's quite popular here, for sure. And she might also have the same kind of views as most European countries do, but things are changing in Europe. There's war fatigue, there's not much economic growth, so defense spending is getting the cut, So things are changing here, and Europe is starting to look more inwards. There's no more appetite for any aggression or outside engagement in that sense. If the US, and I think really, if the US were to make more use of the diplomatic arsenal that it has, and diplomacy, more talks, like it did with the Iran case, it was beautiful, Now you have an economy opening up, a more peaceful Iran for the moment, stable, but it made use of all the diplomatic means, channels of communication, and that's important.
Yeah,
So
well,
if
I think it makes it critically important that we have somebody who can do that as the president, because
Yes.
we've talked about. I mean, Korea is sending missiles up because there are wars and skirmishes in Africa, on horrible travesties because of what's happening in Europe. It seems like we are. That the winds of war, even global war, cyber terrorism, it's out there. And we really have to keep a lid on all of that and deal with it. And that means if the U.S. is to be a global leader, it has to get out there and keep the lid on. And so the president is so much more important than just being a domestic president. He becomes, in a sense, I don't know if you'll agree, but in a funny way, becomes the president of the world. And if he does the job properly, he can keep a lid on it. If he doesn't, we're going to have trouble, all of us, everywhere, going forward. Don't you think?
It's true, I agree. I always had the opinion that everyone should get a vote in US elections, every citizen of the world, because what happens in US elections impacts all of us in a way. For sure, if Trump would have won, and I already say would have, it would be disaster.
Yeah.
That's for certain.
Yeah.
But, I don't think now the world's problems are the US's problems. It's becoming a more multipolar world order. There are many countries coming up. So you have already like 10 or 15 big countries. The G20 is a perfect example of how you need the rest to solve crises. So I don't really think that the US would really have to take the burden of all these little issues everywhere. It's already pulled back so much from the Middle East. I think Asia is the big focus now. So a leader who would kind of devote attention more to the US internally, pump up its economy more, make sure its citizens are fine, I think that would really help make the US a bigger foreign policy actor. I think so.
Okay, well, I hope you cast your vote accordingly, Gauri.
Virtual vote.
Whatever vote that is. Gauri Kandekar with globalrelationsforum.org, joining us on a monthly basis anyway, and hopefully more from time to time. on midnight in Brussels, and I so enjoy. I love these conversations with you. Thank you so much, Gauri. Till
Thank
next
you.
time. Aloha.
Yes.